lecture one, but it's not on my what additional additional resources. Can you please share with us also that activity that we did?
Yes, so what we will do is um, we will be uploading all of the aspects that we have discussed in the first part of the lecture, as well as the questions, that we do cover today as well. That will be uploaded on my Unisa, and you will be able to find those under additional resources. Okay, so good day once again. Today we will be going through some of the aspects that we have perhaps not maybe covered in the first lecture. But if there are any questions at any point in time, please feel free to, to interject, as I may not necessarily always see the main screen due to my screen being shared. We have covered on aspects such as materiality and other aspects in terms of risks as well. Today we will be doing a continuation, and we will be focusing on a different question. This question will also be uploaded on my Unisa, and I would like to share this question on screen. Let's start off with the required. We have required from part A up until H. However, G and H related to the substantive procedures, and part H related to, audit opinion and reporting. So those questions you could perhaps maybe focus on at a later stage with the forthcoming learning units. For today, we'll be focusing on the other aspects which, primarily relate to learning units 6 and 7, with aspects of preceding learning units as well that do feature. But this sort of gives you a great in-depth with regards to integration. And, hence we will be going through several parts of this question. I will just be shortly reading out the various parts of the required. Thereafter, we will be going into the scenario itself, of which we will then be reading the scenario and dissecting the information, and evaluating certain aspects that do come to light as a result thereof. Okay. So for part A, with reference to the introduction and background information, this was specific. Discuss any concerns you have regarding Mrs. Dlamini's acceptance of the appointment as the external auditors of the confectionery M Group in terms of the SAICA Code of Professional Conduct. This was CPC, and this was client acceptance. For part B, with reference to the introduction and background information, so with reference to the same information, describe the audit risk. And in this instance, when we look at audit risk, we need to understand that the audit risk is broken up into the inherent risk. Anyone? What else?
Control risk and
Control risk. Control risk.
We got control risk
Detection.
and your detection risk as well. Well
Audit
done.
risk.
Yes, so that's the components of audit risk. So audit risk, well done, guys. So the components of audit risk is inherent risk, a control risk, and a detection risk. If I had only asked for the, let's just say, risk of material misstatement, could I have the components of the risk of material misstatement?
It's inherent and
It's,
controlled.
it's in, yes.
I didn't get that.
Inherent and control.
Inherent in control. That's perfect. So what we're looking for here is what I'm trying to emphasize in essence is the importance of reading the required carefully, because sometimes these aspects could be forgotten, you know, like in terms of audit risk, if you do not remember to discuss detection risk, then you could forfeit, you know, or lose out on a couple of marks. Describe the audit risk at the overall financial statement level in the consolidated financial statements. We also have a PVAA mark, which is, you know, one of the easy marks to obtain. So we surely need to get that mark, right? For part C, with reference to the background information, so here I'm seeing the difference is they ask for to utilize the background information as opposed to part A and part B, which made reference to the background information as well as the introduction. So it was quite specific in terms of making reference to that type of information. With reference to the background information in extracts from the annual financial statements, so we also have the extracts. In this instance, there were two aspects. I see there's a comment that is the question displayed? Can anyone else not see the question maybe?
We can see it, sir.
Okay. I think most seem to be able to see it. I see someone say they cannot hear me. Am I sounding, am I audible to the others?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So Mion, I think perhaps maybe zoom in a bit more into the question. I have it displayed as one page on the screen. So perhaps maybe just zoom in a bit. And it probably would then, you know, resolve that issue. But if you're still encountering challenges, please post in the chat again. Okay, great. With reference to the background information and extracts from the annual financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2021, discuss whether or not. What does whether or not tell us? Anybody? In any situation, whether or not. What
Should
is
make a
the
decision.
examiner asking for?
It means you must also give a conclusion after
Perfect.
we finish this discussion.
No, absolutely perfect. Eh? Well done. I see also in the chat as well. CV, very well done. So we need to conclude. That's the important aspect, and that's a free mark. Discuss whether or not the confectionery M group will be able to continue and operate as a going concern in the foreseeable future. Now, this is the element of integrating something of the aspects like management accounting, which become more relevant when you get to test 4 and there's integration in the test for assessment and for the examination as well. But this 9 marks is a good practice, for something indicative of that. For part D, with reference to annexure A, now this was specific as well. It made reference to a particular annexure. Draft a response email to Mr. Mkize in which you discuss the aspects that Vibrant should consider when evaluating whether the work of the internal audit function can be used for the purposes of the confectionery M group external audit. So this is reliance on the work of the internal audit function. Hence, when looking for the internal audit function, I see there were aspects of business risk coming through. Yes, those business risks would then, in essence, also fall under the umbrella. And, in essence, would be everything at operational level and, strategic, etc. Those aspects, those aspects would then also feature as a part of the information that one would perceive from the information that we do see. I see that there is a question. Mosala.
Thank you, sir. A quick question. I just saw now in the question that you just displayed, it spoke about the work of an internal auditor. But in the learning unit, I saw it had ISA 610 internal audit instead of your ISA 610, but it said work of, I think, of an expert instead of work of an internal auditor. So I wanted to find out, are we looking at ISA 610 or ISA 620?
Okay, so in terms of the specific ISAs itself, there is a reliance on the expert. There's obviously the work of internal audit. And for the purposes of this example, we're looking at the the aspects of 620.
No, I was speaking in relation to the learning unit. The learning unit said ISA 610, but it actually mentioned the description as ISA 620. ISA 620 is the work of an expert. Then 610 is the internal audit.
Yes, 610 is indeed the internal audit.
Yes,
610 is the internal audit.
it mixed both. So I wanted to know our focus in terms of this test. Is it 610 or 620 or both?
No, I think in terms of this test, we looking at the 610, the work of internal audit. But in essence as well, that's what this question is basically focused on. If I'm answering you correctly, if I understand you correctly, internal audit function is ISA 610.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay, I hope I answered you correctly. So with reference to Annexure A, draft a response email to Mr. Mkize in which you discuss the aspects that Vibrant should consider when evaluating whether the work of the internal audit function can be used for the purposes of the confectionery M group external audit. Communication skills mark. This is another PVAA. And for this, we would need to get this mark. So as can be seen, to obtain the communication skills presentation mark, one would need to draft an email, as we are requested to draft a response email. So it's always important to remain articulate in formulating your answers. And, as such, sometimes, what we identify when asked for a table format is you get answers where students may in certain instances may have omitted utilizing a table where it was specifically asked for. Not only do you forfeit on the BVAA presentation mark, but it also makes it challenging for a marker to then follow the flow if the presentation of the answer is not, as requested. Obviously, a marker would look for the, read each of these sentences appropriately, and you would only lose out on the presentation mark. But just in terms of the flow of the answer, it would read better, if presented as requested. So do not lose out on these basic marks and these presentation marks. For part E, with reference to annexure B, are there any questions? See, there's a question in the chat of where can I get the question. So this will be posted on my UNISA under the additional resources, in addition to the other aspects of part 1 of this lecture, where we've discussed various aspects relating to materiality, etc. See if there's another. Can you present your screen? I think the screen is sharing. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, it's sharing.
Sharing. I'm not too sure, Jadine. Perhaps maybe try to log out. Yes. And log back in just to see. Okay. Part E, with reference to annexure B. So this was specific as well, where reference was made to a specific annexure. Critically analyze. So, anybody, when you see the words critically analyze, what do you think of?
You look at the positives and the negatives, and you also consider numbers plus statements or explanations.
Okay. Could you elaborate a bit on those by giving examples? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Yes, Tandeka. Sorry, I didn't get to who gave that brilliant answer. Could you please maybe give an example or so, elaborate on what you've stated?
I'm trying to think of an example that's appropriate. Maybe let's say comment, or maybe let's say critically analyze maybe the actions of the director. Maybe the director did something that affects even the financials. So you speak on that. You also comment on the financials in terms of the numbers, and you also put the positives and the negatives in terms of how it might affect the business or not. And his conduct also you look at maybe the ethical conduct of the director, but you look at all angles and you also have a conclusion.
That's brilliant. Well done, Masala. I think that's in essence what you would do. I see there are other comments in the chat as well. Tabisile, advantages and disadvantages. Tandiaka, you've indicated the good and the bad. Berta, negatives and positives, any additional, and conclude. Yeah, we always need the conclusions, correct? Juliet, also include what should have been done. Yes, that's important in terms of a critical analysis. That's another fundamental aspect. Also include what should have been done. So in instances and in a year, and it comes across in this part, ironically, interesting enough. So that was a brilliant one observation as well. Critically analyze the overall audit strategy for the confectionery M group prepared by the first year trainee auditor for the financial year ended. So now in terms of this critical analysis, what would be done would be the positives as well as the negatives, and evaluations of other aspects that should also be done. You know, there should be other aspects of what should be done. And that's that's basically a brilliant comment as well. So I think you guys have all got this concept, and you'll see it now feature when we go into the solution. We'll be going into the solution in a bit. And perhaps let's have a look at see, there's another question which came through. Amishka, would you say critically analyze and evaluate are the same in this case? Well, a critical analysis is more in depth than an evaluation. And it would be more elaboration, that comes across from a critical analysis. However, if the mark analogy is limited, like if it's 10 marks or, perhaps maybe even a 13-mark question, also that would not be sufficient, to then see the variance largely enough between the two. But if it was, for instance, a 30-mark question, then there would be more in-depth to write on a critical analysis versus an evaluation. So that would be the difference for the most part. However, the points that you would come across if you're doing an evaluation or critical analysis would be, to a large extent, very similar in nature. The same, obviously, in terms of the points you would write. And you may more often than not arrive at the same answer as well. So if you were to see, evaluate the overall audit strategy for the confectionery M group prepared by the first year trainee auditor, you could evaluate, but I think a critical analysis is specific to take an in-depth dive. I think that has more impact. But I guess you could interchangeably use the evaluation as well. Like I said, if the marks are low, it would not make too much of a difference. So what we will now be doing is be going through the introduction and background information, and then perhaps maybe going into some of these parts and having a look at how we could derive an answer using specific strategies as well. Let's read part F while we are at it with reference to Annexure C. So here as well, there was specific information that one would need to look at. Describe the controls that the confectionery M group should have implemented to prevent and/or detect and correct the internal audit department findings. So these are proposed controls that one would need to put into place. And for proposed controls, ideally what you would look at, and more often than not in today's environment, there would be computer controls. As in today's industries, if you go out into audit practice, and regardless of which auditee you are at, an electronic environment would more often than not be what you're faced with. So for those aspects, it would need to be specifics of, computer controls that come into play. And those are, if you look at a lot of past papers as well as suggested solutions, the computer controls are very simplistic in nature, and it's very simple marks, to obtain. You can score really well in a question. If you see computer controls, this is the question you're going to do well in. And inherently, you will see in this question, that's what does feature. For part 2, identify the weaknesses in the system of the confectionery M group's internal controls as evident from the sales business processes. So they're looking at sales business processes for the new online platform and recommend internal controls to address the weaknesses. So what we have here are we're looking for internal controls, weaknesses in the internal controls, and recommendations to address these weaknesses. So recommendations to address a weakness is if you see something that's not performing the way it should, the recommendation would be an elaboration of the weakness. And when we get into the solution, there are various examples of which I will then be, demonstrating to you guys. I think it was Tumelo. I think I seen you raise your hand.
Oh yeah, sorry. No, I was just saying it's safe to say that you have to know all your cycles then.
Yes, it's safe to say that you need to know all of your cycles. And in knowing all of your cycles, it's a brilliant point that you bring up, Jamelo, because you can learn the cycle, and this you get from undergraduate knowledge. So you got to learn your cycles. And as a part of learning your cycles, that gives you a textbook example of how something ideally should be. However, in a scenario, there could be deviations from that, from a practical company that's out there. And when we are reading this scenario, you will be able, you got to know your cycle. And when you do understand the cycle of what's in this question, you can then do a comparison to what is here versus what's there. And it's important then when knowing the cycles, not to memory dump information that you've learned from a cycle, and there's no trigger points in the scenario for that specific information. Fair enough, if we're asking you for controls that should be implemented, then you have the perfect cycle because, that's in essence what you want to do. You want to prescribe that perfect cycle. But also remember, there is no such thing as a perfect cycle. So a textbook cycle, in essence, is not perfect because each entity, each company is unique. You can compare companies in the telecommunications industry and they could have cycles which would be similar in nature. Yes, Amishka, industry specific, well done. So if you're comparing, like I said, the telecommunications industry or the aviation industry, Emirates, Emirates Airlines could obviously compare, within the same ambit, to Cathay Pacific. And that's how an analogy would be made because it's within that specific industry. So that is a good spot. Well done, Tumelo. So we can now go into the scenario and dissect the information in the scenario. I see that there is another question. I did not get that. Mohadi, are we going to be examined on cycles for test 2? Yes, indeed. Cycles do feature as a part of the scope of test 2, and something typical within the sphere of what I have here in terms of the required. Looking at part D, for instance, controls that should be implemented. Also, weaknesses in a business process does feature, as well as recommended controls. That is surely part of the syllabi for the scope of test and of test 2 assessment. What I would suggest in terms of the cycles, I would not expect one to, you're welcome. I would not expect one to go and open up all of the cycles and, learn them off completely word by word. I would suggest perhaps maybe going through more questions, various past papers, various past questions that have, many different cycles, for instance. And by doing questions with different cycles, you would learn the cycles indirectly, as well as the examination technique, as well as the practice of answering questions, because that, ladies and gentlemen, is in essence the ultimate key to taking you over the line at the PGDA, CTA honors level. That in essence is the key. And that's why we spend so much time on questions specifically within these sessions, because theoretical aspects, you got to go and refresh those aspects, but it's key and it's fundamental. If you're falling short of time and you're getting closer to the test or examination, if you're falling short of time, you do as many questions as you possibly can. You do as many questions as you possibly can. I think there is a request for me to display the entire required. I just would like to see something. Just give me a moment. I will take your question in a moment, Aisha. Okay. So now I think there was yes, I think there was a request to show the required. So here's the required. I'll just display it on screen for a short while and take it away in a bit. So what I would suggest is after this, after this lecture, after this recording, perhaps watch the recording again whilst doing the question, because then by then the question will be uploaded on the additional resources on my UNISA. So do the question again and listen to the recording whilst, identifying and coding the various parts of the required. I'm just going down a bit. I'll display this for just a bit. Are there any questions in the interim? I don't want to switch screens, as I just want to display this on screen for anybody who would like to, maybe check this out. But are there any questions for now? All seems to be good. Okay, so the recording will be posted on the additional resources as well as the material for this class. We can now go to the scenario. Is everybody good? Can we go through to the scenario, or anyone like the required displayed on screen for a little while more?
A quick question. I just wanted to find out if, since test of controls were saying that they are also examinable for test 2, then for substantive testing, is it not examinable? Because as we know that audit strategy is also part of response to risk. And one of the things that we must actually do our test of controls at substantive testing. So if test of controls is examinable, then does it mean that you must also look at substantive testing?
Thank you for the question. Test of controls are not examinable for test 2. So test of controls as well as the substantive procedures are only examinable from test 3 henceforth, not from test 2. For part F in this required, we are not asking for the test of controls, how you would test the controls. What is being asked here is describe the controls that should have been implemented. So what controls would you like to put into place? Now, once controls are in place, the scope for test 3 would then come into play of how you would then test these controls. So with test 2, for instance, looking at the risk of material misstatement at the assertion level as an instance, you would then diagnose, what the specific risk at the assertion level is. You would diagnose what the problem is, and then the substantive procedure, which is the scope for test 3, would be what procedure would you perform to mitigate that risk to an acceptable level. So what we are asking for here is the scribe controls that you would ideally would like to implement, not those that are, not how would you test them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Lord.
You're welcome. Yes, Tamela, I see there is a hand. Yes,
Yep.
sir.
Sorry, just off the back of that, from the questions that I've done, I've seen that you may not need to know substantive procedures, but understanding them at a high level and being able to comment on sort of the nature and the timing of the procedures for the audit strategy does come out.
Yes. Could you elaborate a bit on that a bit more?
So an example, the timing of your procedures could be what's the word I'm looking for?
I have one. Maybe when you speak of a high level, you're speaking in terms of where they would actually indicate maybe if there's a high risk, then they would say that you must actually focus more on substantive testing. And in those substantive testing, you must actually not focus more on analytical procedures, but in detail testing. So maybe that's the high level, but you'll correct me, Tumelo.
Okay, so I was saying more like as a response, the auditor's response to say risk of material misstatement, right? If you ask for the response and we've determined that management may be in a position to commit fraud overall in general, the timing of your procedures could change. You could make them sort of irregular or test at the very end of the period, something like that. So you are speaking to the procedure, but you're speaking at a higher level, if I'm making sense.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I got it from you, Tumelo, as well as the other gentleman. Thank you. Where this is now going into the hierarchy of the umbrella is from the aspect of the audit plan, where you're looking at the nature, timing, and extent. And, if you're looking at those aspects, the nature of procedures you would perform would maybe not be, would be less test of controls, maybe more substantive procedures. And within substantive procedures, more test of detail and less analytical. So that in essence is more like, plan per se, but it is an audit response as well. You're correct in saying that it is an audit response, to what has been identified. So in essence, it would work interchangeably between the two. So that is a good analogy, and thanks for that. So that is a part of the higher hierarchy of within the audit plan. And in this question, what we have here is the audit strategy. If I go down to the required again, part E made reference to the audit strategy. And for the audit strategy, we're looking at something entirely different. Now this is the audit plan, whereas the audit strategy would define the scope, timing, and direction at a more operational level. And we will be unpacking those as we go into, the solution for part E. I will now be displaying this question on screen. And what one would need to do in any question is code the information, highlight specific aspects. What I like to do is highlight all of the amounts and numerical values in gray. So without further ado, let's get into it. Introduction and background information, the famous introduction and background information that's being made reference to all of the time in the required for part A as well as part B. Part C only made reference to the background information. So let's get the coding of the colors correct as well. I think I'm going to find that color again. So let's do this. Here we go. Yeah. Introduction. You are an audit senior at Vibrant Assurance Incorporated, Vibrant, a medium-sized audit firm. So medium-sized audit firm, we know always what's the size of the audit firm. And this would be in relation to maybe if we're doing an evaluation and we're seeing, the audit firm for a pre-engagement of a particular client, if that would be whether we would have sufficient audit staff available, etc. Located in Johannesburg, Vibrant have experienced significant challenges in recent years in terms of obtaining new clients. That already sounds like a red flag. Okay, so let's see what happens. Hansford and Mrs. Dlamini, an audit partner at Vibrant, was ecstatic upon being approached by Mr. Mkize, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Confectionery Mania Limited, Confectionery, regarding an external audit opportunity. Mr. Mkize proposed that Vibrant should become the new external auditors to conduct the audit of Confectionery M and its newly acquired subsidiary, acquired in January 2021. So we already have a subsidiary. And in terms of a subsidiary, now we need to, when you see subsidiary or you see associate, for instance, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Anybody?
Consolidation
Related party transactions.
and related party.
Okay, perfect. And when we think about these related party transactions in terms of IS-24 as well as these IFRS 3 aspects for the subsidiary or the group reporting, what part of the scope in terms of required, what would you think a typical required would be of that? Or which ambit within the required would it fall under?
Risk of material misstatement.
And what would the risks potentially be?
A complex transaction, non-disclosure of related party.
Can we have some more? Anybody? Well done on those.
Could it also include something like segment auditors being aligned with what we would want to achieve, whether we're using them or we having to do the segment audit?
Yes, sure. Surely will.
Intergroup transactions.
What about intergroup transactions?
Not being performed properly.
Can somebody give me an example of that? Compliance with IFRS.
Could it be
you can go, Teresa.
could it be that intra-group transactions may not be eliminated?
Correct. It may not be eliminated on consolidation.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. Well done. So those are risks that have already featured. I mean, for what it's worth. Here's the part B, by the way, with reference to describe the risk of material misstatement in the overall financial statements. Operates as a group. There's a risk of material misstatement in the consolidated financial statements because intergroup transactions may not be accounted for properly and consolidated and disclosed correctly. There we go. My audience had that. There is a risk of material misstatement in the consolidated financial statements as controls may not be operating consistently between the two companies. We did not get that one. Fine, but there could be other trigger points in the scenario. There is a risk of material misstatement in the annual financial statements of confectionery M as the acquisition of chocolates. Let's categorize the easy marks as green. There is a risk of material misstatement in the annual financial statements of confectionery M as the acquisition of chocolates may not be accounted for in terms of IFRS 310. That's an easy mark and we're supposed to get that one. Did anyone want to say that? And did not get the opportunity?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, fine. I'm gonna put this as the green as well. We got an easy mark here. There's a risk of material misstatement in the consolidated annual financial statements as of the confectionery M group because intergroup party transactions might not be eliminated on a consolidation. Right, we had that. There's a risk of material misstatement in the consolidated annual financial statements of confectionery M group because you see, just by the way, I've been reading. I'm gonna mute them in a second. Just give me a second. Okay, it's silent. Give me a moment. I see that hand. Just give me one moment. Okay. I just want to emphasize something right here. You see the words that I have now highlighted in blue. Can anybody tell me, or rather, let me say it this way. There is a risk of material misstatement in the consolidated annual financial statements of the confectionery M group because you could have written just these words and you see every sentence from 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 begins with the same words. Can you guys see that? Up until the word because. Do you guys see that? So what you could do is you could have just that because, and under because you could have, separate points. You could have separate points under because. So for instance, you could have 12.1, 12.2, etc. And list your points as such. And that way you would reduce verbosity, you would write less and get to, implement better examination technique to achieve more in less time. Does anybody not understand that concept? It's important if you do not understand that concept for you to ask me to repeat what I've stated, as it's fundamental in terms of examination technique. Can I get a few yeses in terms of, guys are with me? Everyone's happy with this concept?
Yes.
What you
we
got?
are
Yes.
with the concept.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I think we got like a lot of yeses, but I'm seeing in the chat that there is a few. Please repeat, and I will repeat in just a moment. I think Mpumelelo, you are waiting for a short while. You may go, sir.
Evening, sir. Just two questions. The first one, just to add on to your exam technique thing. If there's a question on, for example, identify the risks of material misstatement, blah blah blah. Can we say, like you've just described, there is a risk of material misstatement due to, and then colon, and then begin to list certain things. Some will be error, some will be fraud, some will be whatever. But if I did it that way, so that I don't have to keep writing the sentence, would that also work? Or do we only group similar ideas, or like one idea into that that grouping technique that you just described? I hope that makes sense. Maybe can we get an answer to that before I ask the next one?
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, okay, sure. That's a great analogy. And you can group as you deem fit, as well as long as your answer is articulated in a professional manner. What I would suggest is avoid paragraph format, and I think inherently with both ways of your perception as well as your output, you are making reference to good examination technique, and you more often than not would have point format. So if it's articulated in point format, and if one could read it and understand it quite well, then by all means, you could follow that format as well. And instead of it being frowned upon, it's actually welcomed upon, as you are presenting more succinct of an answer and more direct. It's showing more confidence in a display of your examination answer sheet.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then the last question. I noticed that your if I was writing this paper, I would have maybe identified the group complexity risk. But in my view, that would have covered it. I would have just spoken about one risk. But I see that in the paper there's 3 points that are allocated towards group risks or risk associated to the complexity of having a group or intertransactions or so my question is, when we come across these things, is it your advice to sort of exhaust every possible kind of risk with a thing like group, for example, because there's 3 marks associated to this one? Hope that makes sense.
Thanks. I think yes. It surely does make sense. Thanks a lot for that question.
Sure.
So there is no prescription, ladies and gentlemen. In saying that, what I'm trying to say is, let's look here. So part B, 10 marks. We're asking you guys for risks, and they're evident in the scenario. What I would suggest is sometimes you could get a 15-mark question. Maybe if you get a 5-mark question, maybe you could just be 1 mark for groups, unless it's asking you specifically in those 5 marks to look at groups. If I get a 15-mark question or even a 20-mark question, I think I probably would write maybe about 4 points on groups, because what examiners tend to do is create a maximum, for marks which are allocated within that sphere. And sometimes it's 3 and other times it's 4. In a very large question, it could go even a bit higher, unless you are specifically and explicitly asked in a required, to focus only on groups. But with that being said, there could be any other type of scenario which could feature in the future, where predominantly and inherently only groups are being spoken of and nothing else. And then that's where the trigger points would then be. But if you look at, sorry, I think you need to mute.
Or like your postari Riama Kazi, Nenda documented that Riebo, Ukoya, that Riebo Lavi Ario, at a child that Rosua.
Yeah, lucky I could mute them. Anyways, where was I? Okay, so yeah, with the groups, yeah, like I was stating, if you get a scenario just which only has trigger points of only groups, then you would probably write more on groups. But where it's split in the information is spread throughout, maybe decentralized operations, listings on the GSE, we know those risks that are going to come about, going concern aspects, maybe some elements on acquiring a new subsidiary, perhaps maybe during the year or even in the preceding years. But there is still group financial reporting, so there is risks of consolidation as well. And, for those type of questions, what you would more often than not see is 3 to 4 marks for the solution. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I'm covered. Thank you.
Welcome. So Mr. Mkhize proposed that Vibrant should become the new external auditors to conduct the audit of confectionery and its newly acquired subsidiary, acquired in 2021, chocolates for the confectionery M Group audit. Mr. Mkhize further indicated that he had dismissed the previous external auditors as they were pedantic and requested too much information, which annoyed him. Okay, so when you see weird things like this, like further indicated that they dismissed the previous auditors as they were pedantic. So if auditors are pedantic and request too much information, isn't that that's what auditors should do? Does anyone feel otherwise?
Yes, I agree. They should do that.
Oh, I thought you were going to disagree. I don't think there's such a thing as maybe, you got to request information that you require to obtain an understanding of the entity and its environment. That will always go back to the key concept. Well done. Requested too much information which annoyed him, so he dismissed the previous auditors. So what does that tell us? If we see somebody dismiss the previous auditors, what does that information tell us about Mr. Mkhize, potentially?
That could bring his integrity into question, due to an attempt to limit the scope of the auditor.
Okay, in layman terms, that's a great answer. That's brilliant. But in layman terms, what are we saying?
Basically,
possibly
management
to
philosophy
create
is
fraud.
that they're not wanting to actually adhere to the, I'd say, the scope of the audit, but more of like, I'd say it's almost like a pre-engagement activity thing whereby they're not actually adhering to the ethical requirements of the whole engagement. So it says a lot about management and the suspicious behavior of that they probably trying to conceal some sort of fraud or errors, that are actually material.
Yeah, so if you walk into this audit client and you know that this person has an attitude problem, like they dismissed the previous auditors because they were too pedantic, like, would you not get a negative perception already? And would that trigger your alarm bells to increase your professional skepticism? Would that do that to your mind?
Yes.
You see how things link up?
Yeah.
See how things link up? So now, not that we're going to go into it, but in terms of an overall audit strategy, what would you do in an audit strategy? You would increase your professional skepticism, am I correct, in an audit strategy? Yeah. Okay. I think there were one or two hands.
Yes, I had a hand up.
Yes, Berta.
Wouldn't it also go into maybe lack of management understanding of what their role is supposed to be in terms of giving access to the auditors, giving the auditors access to information whenever it's required?
Perhaps maybe that would be a bit more
Pre-engagement, I know.
Yes. Look, I think here we were looking more at the sorry, you were saying?
I wanted to say, much as it's pre-engagement, it would affect how you would do the work in the end. Because if you're doing a strategy and you have no access to information, it might tend to be a bit of a problem in terms of your planning.
Yes, no, sure. So I think in terms of the audit plan, I think that's where you're linking this up, which is a great analogy. But, just specifically, I'm going to mute. And then, okay, I think I just want to get that. So in terms of that's a great analogy in terms of going into the audit plan. and further elaboration as such. But for this specific part, you know, it is indicative, and you know what I would like to have demonstrated is that this individual dismissed the previous auditors as they request. They were pedantic, they were detailed, they wanted a lot of information, and it seems like Mr. Mkize does not like that vibe, and that goes without saying. And there's no such thing, because we need to obtain information that is necessary for us to obtain an understanding to do the work that's necessary to provide an audit opinion. So anyways, it goes on to further state, Mr. Mkize further indicated that Vibrant would only be appointed as the new group external auditors on condition that Vibrant does not contact the previous auditors. No way, that already is a red flag. So this individual is intimidating us as auditors and saying do not contact the previous auditors. That already is, you know, evident of his integrity and his attitude. And it is necessary, you know, to obtain certain information. So that's a red flag which we've identified from him. Mrs. Dlamini agreed to this condition and Vibrant was appointed to conduct the group external audit for the financial year. So now we also need to see whether Mrs. Dlamini is adhering to certain laws and regulations. So where we have an audit personnel, such as Mrs. Dlamini, and who is Mrs. Dlamini in this instance? Anybody? Mrs. Dlamini is the audit partner.
She's a partner. So it will affect CPC as well.
Yes. So, you know, in terms of the CPC, we're going to look at Mrs. Dlamini's aspect and, well, is she a CASA?
Yes, she is.
Well, what does that mean? For 1 mark in the memo, what does that mean?
Part 1, 3, and 4 are applicable for that because she's in private practice. She's in practice.
Yes. No, right it as a point in the
Hello.
solution. What? Yes, I hear
So
you.
where's
Hello.
Kofar? How are we doing?
Oh. Is that a phone call? I think that we mute that and you guys can unmute again.
Then I like no unmute her. My no unmute her. I mean,
Let's get this
no
muted.
unmute her.
Okay, Sibongile, I see you laughing. Okay, fine. Who wants to jump in? You guys can elaborate on that for 1 point in the solution. Let's go.
I'd say she is required to comply with the ethical code of ethical code of conduct.
Absolutely perfect. And if you look here at the just by the way, you know, we're not going into the full part, but with reference to the introduction and background information, discuss any concerns you have regarding Mrs. Dlamini's acceptance of the appointment as the external auditors of Confectionery M Group in terms of the SAICA Code of Professional Conduct. Point number 1, the easy mark, slam dunk. Mrs. Dlamini is a CASA in public practice. She must comply with the SAICA Code of Professional Conduct. We're all going to get this mark. Am I correct in saying that? No. Shareholding of confectionery. What we have here is Confectionery M. We have directors 60%, other stakeholders 40%. And for the subsidiary, which is chocolates, we got for Confectionery M, which holds 90%, and other stakeholders 10%. So this is 90%, and hence it is a controlling interest and a subsidiary. That equates for great accounting integration. 1.2 background information. Confectionery chocolates were established in July 2005 and are listed on the JSE. What comes to mind more often than not when one sees the JSE?
It's the governance requirements. So it's the requirements, the Companies Act, the King 5, the SACA Code of Professional Conduct, and where auditors are involved, the APA Act. So it's all the various statutory requirements, and particularly where the Section 260 is also applicable where there's non-compliance.
Yes, no, thank you. I think that's a deep analogy, in terms of the JSE listed company, we would, there would be potential companies like aspects that do come through. But the question I have right now is, when you see that JSE in the question in a scenario, what's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of potential required? What are the slam dunk 2 marks that you're maybe going to get? I'm seeing answers that are popping up in the chat, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. Can anybody shout out loud as well?
They might misstate, there's a risk of them misstating the annual financial statements in order to comply with the JSE listing requirements.
Oh, yes. Here we go. JSE listing requirements. And another mark. Or another mark.
I think they can also maybe overstate their assets and as well as their revenues in
I
order to
always say
maintain.
stringent listing requirements.
Sorry, I think, okay, let the first person finish the answer, and then the second person will get an opportunity.
Yes, I was saying they would overstate. There's a risk that they can overstate their assets and revenue in order to maintain a higher share price.
Okay, overstatement of the assets and revenue and understatement of the
Liabilities and expenses.
liabilities and expenses. Well done. And we have another answer as well. I think the second candidate, you have an answer afterwards. You may go now as well. I'm not sure who the gentleman was, but I did not get that answer, but I see that all of the answers are coming up in the chat. There's also another comment that the firm is a medium-sized firm and might not have sufficient capacity for a listed client. I think a medium-sized firm would be okay to audit a listed client. I think in practice that would be appropriate. That would be fine. And remember, on the JSE, on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange listing as well, there are various companies of different sizes in nature. So, for instance, not every company is the size of Facebook, for instance. So, in saying that, there are listed companies which one would be able to audit, and with a medium-sized firm. So let's go on further. Confectionery and chocolates were established in July 2005. I think there was another question as well. So when we ask for the risks at the social level, of a specific transaction or an account balance, that would indeed be risks at the assertion level, sure. Okay. There's the risk the entry may not comply with the rules and regulations in terms of the JSE. Thanks as well, Angeline. Thank you for the question. Vadiswa. I think we can go back to the scenario. The confectionery M Group's core operations are in the retail trade industry, and their inventory items consist of a vast. So now, in terms of the industry, can somebody shout out a couple of industries, just in general?
Retail.
Mining. Yeah, we got
Construction.
retail, we got mining, yeah.
Construction.
Yes.
Hospitality.
Manufacturing.
Transport.
Hospitality, manufacturing, well done. Transport.
Hotel.
I didn't get that one.
Consulting.
Consulting.
Financial services.
The consulting
Healthcare.
services as well. Healthcare. Great. Yeah. So there are many industries, and in any type of scenario, you're gonna perhaps maybe get a particular industry. When you see the industry, there are business risks relative to that industry. And just in terms of business risks, think of it from a practical point of view, you know, in your real world life. You know, what are the risks that you think of, that you see on TV, that you see on social media, that you know about, that are happening, that's happening, for instance, in the manufacturing industry, construction industry, or in the healthcare sector, for instance. You know, just with those type of aspects, you could see what could potentially go wrong within that industry. And those are the business risks that would be evident that the company would be faced with. And those are practical, real world risks that you see and you read about. So when you're looking at tests, examinations, solutions, think about those real world risks, and you'll see how the magic just comes together. That in essence, that's inherently what's being written on the solution and memorandums. So retail trade. So when you have manufacturing industry, for instance, in the manufacturing industry, a question that which has manufacturing probably has raw materials, labor, and a component of those aspects which build up to the inventory, as well as the inventory would then have different aspects as well of the raw materials, the work in progress, as well as the finished goods, as opposed to a retail trade industry that could have various finished goods items that they do sell. Arguably, they could have many work in progress items that they do sell. Maybe that's how they purchase it and do sell it, but in essence, those are what they would do. It's the core of it. I think let's not look for the exceptions, but focus on, you know, the practicality for the most part. And that would in essence be like a retail trade industry, finished good items that the company would sell. Confectionery M's Group's corporations are in the retail trade industry, and the inventory items consist of a vast number of confectioneries, such as sweets and chocolates. Oh no, I think I need to mute that again. Yeah. Confectionery M's a group, core groups or corporations consist of stores that are widespread throughout South Africa, and its head office building is in Johannesburg. So if the corporations consist of stores that are widespread throughout South Africa, what does that tell you? Anybody?
Like the risk of I'd say not being able to have like the sufficient, I'll put it in layman's terms, like not having sufficient resources to actually cover the wide scope. And so having to depend on maybe external expertise or specialized expertise, or having to what is it, allocate maybe certain staff to do maybe, an inventory count, for example, or field visits in particular branches that are of high material risk, such concerns, yeah, such considerations, yeah.
Is it me or it's quiet in here?
It is
It's
quiet.
You guys chased the lecture away, Bulavi.
I thought you guys didn't want to mute your mics.
You guys are so unserious.
Everyone, I think we seem to have lost connection. I think let's have a look and see. I think the recording is still on. Am I audible? And is everybody with me?
Yes, now you're
Yes,
audible.
we
You
can
were
hear
lost.
you.
Okay, that's great. So I think let's continue where we left off. I just want to see what's the answers that are coming through, and then I think I heard the last question in its entirety. If I did miss some aspect of it, please correct me. So what I see here, internal controls may not be operating effectively in different locations. You are not on your own, comrades. I am here with you guys. Internal controls may not be operating effectively in different locations. So yes, there is a good analogy. The statements that came through, the first part was from an auditor perspective, based on the entity having decentralized operations. And when I make reference to these decentralized operations, the operations are widespread throughout South Africa. And as a result thereof, there could be a challenge in terms of inventory counts, etc., and going to the various aspects of various regions across, across South Africa, like maybe going to Johannesburg, then going to Cape Town, going to various aspects of Mpumalanga. And we may not have sufficient staff and personnel, and we may have to rely.
Just read that out loud.
And yes, maybe it's widespread throughout South Africa. I think what would happen is we may not have sufficient staff to go to the various areas in South Africa to conduct the audit, and we may need to utilize other audit firms as well. There's also the other element of looking at it from a risk perspective, and I think that there were inferences that probably came through. Let's have a look and see. Control environment, other location might be different. Controls might not be functioning consistently. Here we go. Here's the one. Nasipa got it out. Yes, operations in various locations. Various locations, those are correct. Decentralized operations. So I think we got that. And that's the part of the scenario that you guys would identify and infer from such information as such. Did everybody get that concept? Is everybody with me on that? Can I maybe get a few yeses?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's perfect.
So,
Thank you. So I just wanted to explain this concept very shortly again. I remember I said I would come back to it. There was a question earlier on it. So listen carefully. This is how you have good examination technique for answering risks, at the overall financial statement level. You could answer it as such. There is a risk of material misstatement. In this instance, it's the consolidated financial statements. But in another question, it may just be, annual financial statements, condensed financial statements. So what we would state here is there is a risk of material misstatement in the consolidated annual financial statements of the company, whatever the company's name is, because, and then you have points underneath those, which are point maybe 1, 2, 3, up until maybe 10, or what have you. It depends on the question that you are answering. And by having a heading at the beginning, it saves you from writing the heading each time for each point. So the guys from earlier, you who asked me to repeat this aspect, have you got it now? Does it make sense? Can I please maybe get some yeses? If you don't understand it, I'll explain it one more time. Just take that as a yes. So basically, this type of strategy should be utilized in various other parts of solutions that you project, and we will be getting to those type of aspects as we proceed. And it also falls into the ambit of test 3. And if we get to that aspect of test 3, we'll cross that bridge of those aspects in those examination technique. So the operations are widespread throughout South Africa, and its head office building is in Johannesburg. The confectionery M Group also has a micro operation store in Mozambique. So that is offshore. And when you see anything offshore in essence, what would one think of? Anything offshore?
Foreign exchange rate.
Brilliant, I like that one. Foreign exchange rate. When you see foreign exchange rate, what parts of the examination papers or type of requirements would it fall under?
Because I didn't quite get that.
So if you're seeing the exchange rates, where would the exchange rates typically appear, under what type of required, and what part of the scope of the syllabus?
your surgeons, yeah, the surgeons, the statutory requirements, and the IFRS financial reporting, and the Companies Act as well, I think. Well, from a local to a global perspective, yeah.
Yes, brilliant. That's one. So we have the Companies Act aspects which do feature, and for the Companies Act aspects, you know, what would you typically see underneath those? Like non-compliance with laws and regulations in foreign countries, perhaps?
Yeah,
You know,
and the Section 77, the liabilities of the directors, the fiduciary duty, um, to act in good faith and transparency, which also comes with, compliance with the international regulations, but also disclosure in terms of how they actually apply the currency. That will also bring in your tax legislation, Section 25D, with the translation rates and transaction dates and year end, which also goes back to touch on the assertion levels in terms of completeness, cut off, and valuation. Yeah.
okay. And I see that when you speak of the social level now, you're going into another element. Now I see Sibongile also has a thumbs up, or rather I put the thumbs up, but she's indicated that the assertion level. Could I get elaboration on the assertion level? What typical type of required would you see where this would fall underneath when we talk about assertion levels?
Risk of material misstatement.
Okay.
Risk of material misstatement at the assertion level, and this could be in terms of the accuracy relating to the foreign exchange transactions as well. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. And your substantive procedures as well.
Oh, brilliant. So we got the substantive procedures as well, because if you have the one, if you diagnose what the problem is, which is the risk of material misstatement at the assertion level, how do you fix the problem with the remedy, which is the substantive procedure? Or rather, how would you obtain assurance regarding that, But you see what the problem is the risk at the assertion level, and the substantive procedures, in essence, the remedy. To mitigate that risk to an acceptable level. So it would feature under a substantive procedure, recalculate the foreign exchange rate, recalculate the amount based on the spot rate, compare the spot rate to the market rate that we're utilizing. So you see how those type of things feature. We're getting some great answers. So I see logistical delays if inventory is delivered in SA. Maybe you could elaborate on that. Currency chosen for the audits. I think the currency chosen for the audits in it would be, yes, what would be our base currency? And if we have a foreign subsidiary, we would then need to convert amounts for the foreign subsidiary, so it's important, in terms of exchange. Alberta, you can, I don't think I got that logistical delays. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just thinking from a perspective of cutoff at the end, it would pose a problem in terms of what we would have to report in a balance sheet, because if we're delivering and we're en route and it hasn't been accounted for, then that's why I've got cutoff at the bottom. I think I should have just included it at the top there. Maybe saying en route during delivery at the end. For me, that's
Yes,
more
no, no,
an inventory issue. That's more an inventory issue in terms of anything else.
Yes, no, surely. I mean, like we were focusing on the foreign, subsidiary of foreign company or foreign operations, but you are 100% correct in saying that. I mean, like if there's inventory en route, you got to take those aspects into account as well. But that will be evident in the scenario, if you do get something like that. Are we good? Both South Africa and Mozambique have unique laws and regulations pertaining to the retail trade industries. When you see laws and regulations, what's the possibility of non-compliance with laws and regulations? Now we see that there are various aspects which come into play. Coronavirus sustainability impact, new endeavors and opportunities. During June 2020, the previous financial year, Mr. Mkhize had commanded 90% of all personnel in the head office building to work remotely due to global pandemics based on COVID-19. Then there was a chief operating officer identified this as an opportunity to explore and expand the group's operations, hence utilized vacant head office land, to manufacture alternate products. They entered into some leasing contracts and they have not leased historically, they have only purchased. So this is the first time that they will be leasing. And hence in terms of IFRS 16, the leases would then be, the aspects of the leases would obviously need to be taken into account. Confectionery and chocolate sustainability has always been impeccable since its inception. However, they had some going concern challenges which were evident. There were strains on the retail trade industry, delays in customer orders. There were operating losses, liquidity problems, retrenchment of personnel, and they tried to implement a mitigating strategy. By doing so, they adopted to an online platform. So now there's the introduction of a new online platform. And when you introduce these new platforms, there could be errors in exchange of operations. There's new software which has been implemented during the current financial year. And with that, obviously, there's risks that are imposed. They were unable to fund the purchase of the operating software, and they applied for a short-term loan. There's conditions specifically attached to the loan, which puts the company into, liquidity, a liquidity aspect issue. And you'll see that does feature in the solution when we get to that shortly. Then we get to the element of where there are extracts of the financial statements. And when you see an extract statements, remember, in the first part of the lecture, which we've done on the 26th, we've done elements of materiality, utilizing a current year as well in comparison to a prior year. And when you do that, we determined which of the years would probably be the most appropriate to utilize. We said recent information is the one you want, if possible. And we looked at various aspects of why you would potentially select historic information. There are various working papers when you guys get down to doing this question. The working papers are, and actually it was an email. There was a PVA mark to respond to that email. Part B was the audit strategy and the critical analyses. C, internal audit department findings, and they were business processes. That's where the questions on you got to know your cycles came into play. An email from Mrs. Dlamini, where I think a response was needed as well. And the summary of, or the email rather, for Annex D was substantive procedures, which is not within the scope for test 2, as I've stated. Hence I've highlighted it in red. Part G and H, which is substantive procedures, and part H was the unresolved audit differences and the impact on the audit opinion. That would be for the forthcoming assessments. But however, from part A to part F, which we have highlighted here, are indeed examinable for test 2 assessment. So, we go on to an extra A, page 1 of 2, email from Mr. Mkize. And, here's the email. It speaks about various aspects. And this is where the ISA 610 was examined. And this is in terms of the internal auditors. And it was done as such. So with this being said, any ISA standard could be examinable. For instance, and if you get ISA, any ISA for that matter, if you get, ISA 540 is an examinable ISA, you would then look at the aspects of ISA 540 in relation to what's provided in the scenario and any of the ISA standards. So what I would suggest is you take your ISA standards and open up the examinable ISA standards, at least have those highlighted. So in a test or examination, and understand, at a minimum, understand what each of the ISA standard numbers are, and just understand what each of the ISAs are about, the abstract of the ISA. So if you do identify something as a trigger point in a question, and a reference is made to an ISA standard that needs to be addressed as a part of your required solution, then you know exactly which textbook to go to, which ISA standard to go to, and then you would have your pages highlighted, your flags, in your textbooks, and you would not be expected to obviously learn everything off, but at least know and reference where it is in the event that you do need it in a test and examination. But it's important to have a basic understanding thereof. We go to an extra B, and in an extra B, this was the audit strategy. For the audit strategy, what we can identify here is working paper B100, right? Audit strategy purpose. The purpose of this working paper is to document the audit strategy for the financial year ended 30th of June 2021. The level of audit risk at the overall financial statement level is assessed as high. So if the risk is assessed as high, what would you do to your materiality? I see low. You would lower the materiality. The following strategy is implemented. Okay, so this is the strategy that was implemented. Engage more experienced staff who are strongly independent and would not be intimidated by management and personalities such as Mr. Mkize. You would want to engage more experienced staff. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Now I'm going to go into the part and you're going to tell me yes or no, right? Critically analyze this. Engage competent and technically well-skilled staff, considering the fact that confectionery M is expanding its operations by acquiring a new subsidiary.
Yes.
You got a yes.
Yes. Yes.
Number 3, obtain more management representations to mitigate the significant sustainability challenges.
The usual information you'd require, sir. Nothing, if there is a problem, yes, but other than that, the normal.
Yes, sir. That's actually get, but I think corroborate the management representation.
So what we're stating here is obtain more management representations. I'm going to leave that for now. Let's go to part 4. Perform more test controls. Remember something, the audit risk is assessed, at the overall financial statement level is assessed as high, and the following audit strategies will be implemented. Perform more test controls due to the new integrated operating software. Because we have more operating software, we're going to perform more test of controls?
I would say perform it, I think throughout the year, maybe at the interim and also at the year-end audit.
Okay, we'll park that for now. Number 5, increase the materiality. I see more substantive and I'm liking that. Remember, we have a new system. Okay, fine. Number 5, increase the materiality level. Due to the concerns relating to the going concern assumption, which had resulted in operating losses, liquidity problems, and the retrenchment of personnel in various departments. Does everybody agree with that?
No,
Yes.
you lower
Explain.
materiality. I would say you lower materiality.
Is that a no?
It's a no.
It's a,
Is
it's a no
everybody
from me.
telling me no?
Yeah.
It's a no from me.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
So
supposed to reduce, yeah.
Okay, so
Lower.
we got everybody that's brilliant and getting the marks. Everybody's getting the good marks. I'm happy. This is a great cohort. Fantastic. So what would you do if you don't increase materiality? What would you do to materiality if you don't increase it?
You lower it.
You need to lower it.
So wouldn't performance materiality anyway be lower? Our planning materiality would be high. Performance materiality would be lower, but if you find there's more problems, then you adjust it again as you're going through.
Yes.
Sure. But I think for the most part, you guys have got the concept of you would decrease the materiality value, you know. And in essence, because of the inferences that have been made relating to going concern, etc. There is one page. When you're doing a critical analysis, what would you also do? We spoke about positives, negatives, and what was the other aspect as well?
Everything else that would be required to be there.
Which is what? What's everything else
So
that
I would
should
say
be
maybe
there?
analytical reviews,
What about it? Can you just give it to me in the form of an answer?
looking
Or
at
points?
reasonability of
Write it
what
as
you'd
if though you
expect
would
to
write
be
an
there.
examination point. So you go. I'm going to give you the floor now shortly, but write it as if though you're writing
I
a point in your
don't know what I'm
examination
supposed
book
to say now.
for 1 mark. You may go. Anybody? When you see audit strategy, what would you more often than not do? For your scope, timing, and direction.
What's the question? What would you not do?
What would you do in terms of your scope, timing, and direction for the audit strategy? In terms of this audit, risk is assessed the supervision.
You'd increase the scope, sir.
You'll
increase.
increase
sorry.
the sample.
Increase the scope, yes.
And you'll also put more experienced staff so that they can actually
More
check.
experienced staff.
Yeah.
Okay, increase the scope, which means you'll increase the sample sizes, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. And then you'd review more closely depending on what's happening on the client.
Increase the supervision.
Yeah.
Yes, that falls under
And also you
supervision.
lower the materiality.
Yes, you will. You may need to utilize an expert.
Yeah, consider if you need an expert with that
Yes.
regard.
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Also, in terms of more management representations, I would want less management representations, would I not? Rely less on management representations and more on corroborating evidence.
Yes.
As opposed to more. You see? That's why I say you need to be a slave for detail in terms of the words that are given to you. That's sneaky.
And also, should you also consider?
Also consider?
We couldn't hear you.
Maybe using fraud specialist.
Yes, utilizing an expert where necessary. So let's go. Let's get straight to it. Where is this? With reference to Annex 2B, critically analyze the overall audit strategy for the confectionery M Group prepared by the first-year trainee auditor for the financial year ended 30th of June 2021. Aspects provided by the first-year trainee auditor. The first-year trainee auditor is correct. The positives and the negatives. You see what I mean? In stating to engage more experienced staff. Easy mark. We all got that. And that's the first point of the three, engage more experienced staff. You see point number one? Everyone's with me?
Yes, sir.
Number,
With you.
perfect, thanks. Number two,
Yes,
the
sir.
first-year trainee auditor is correct in stating to engage competent and technically well-skilled staff. Engage technically and well-skilled staff. Number two, everybody got that point? Less the positives. Number three, less the negatives. The first-year trainee auditor is incorrect in stating to obtain more management representation letters, because what we should do in essence is the inverse, obtaining less management representation letters. And this in essence goes with the fact that we are getting the negative factors as well. The auditor would want to place less reliance on management representation letters because of these personalities and more on corroborating evidence, 2 marks. Fourth analysis, the first-year trainee auditor is incorrect in stating to perform more test of controls. This is because the control environment is compromised due to the questionable integrity of Mr. Mkize. Remember, we spoke about his integrity in the beginning of the question, when we looked at the background information. And the integrity of management personnel was impaired. And as a result of his impaired integrity, that's why less reliance is placed on here. So we're also evaluating the negative. The first-year trainee auditor is incorrect in stating to increase materiality, because what we should do is the inverse of the auditor would want to lower the materiality value. You see what I mean? Everybody's with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Great aspect. Now, what else should have been done? The super easy marks. Here's where distinctions are made. You guys listening carefully. So, generally, the easy marks of any question of any required in any type of the syllabi always has general and easy marks. And in this instance, we asked for audit strategy. So, I mean, for what it's worth, I'm asking you for audit strategy. And in this instance, what we said is the audit team needs to exercise and increase the degree of professional skepticism. Simplistic. Integrity by management. We spoke about that aspect as well. Oh, we missed this aspect. Fair enough. Let's leave it like that. Increase the sample size. Everybody got that. Am I correct in saying that? Increase the element of unpredictability. Perform more substantive procedures with less test of detail. We stated that. Use an expert. Somebody said the fraud expert. Perform audit procedures closer to year end. Did anybody get that?
Yes, yes.
I think I heard that. Increase supervision. We got a lot of candidates using the other auditors of Mozambique. We may not have got all that, but remember something, guys. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of the maximum of 8 marks already. It's just that. You see what I mean? And the other analogy was the positives and negative factors. So this is an audit strategy. If you get an audit plan, you would speak about the nature, timing, and extent. Time does not permit us today to go into the aspects of the audit plan. But in terms of nature timing and extent, under nature, you would have a look at necessity, possibility, and desirability. And, that's something you should go through as well. You need to obtain an understanding of the audit plan as well as the audit strategy. Furthermore, for this question, we have the financial statements. It was great. There was aspects of what the internal audit department has found in Annexure C. For that, there are different spheres and of different aspects relating to that's a really good part to go through as well. Business processes, ideal controls that should be in place. And typically, if you go to, here's a computer environment. And in this type of a computer environment, you'll see there are personnel that are here, there's online orders which happen. Everybody has access to these terminals. They use shared credentials, there's centralized emails, there's people that perform the same duty and the same functions more than once. Those are the common culprits that do feature. So what would you typically think of, in those instances? If I were to ask you guys, just in terms of controls and computer controls in essence, what controls would you ideally, in an ideal situation, what controls should be in place?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Let's put it this way. So you go to a client and you see that there are certain functions which happen as a result of that business. And for those functions, you see that, the staff personnel at the client operate on computer terminals. They go into an office. They go into a building in the morning. They get into the building. They go to the terminals of the computers. They go into those computers and they perform the work on those computers. And the computer gives them the answers. So in such an environment, which is now 99% of companies out there, am I correct in saying that?
Yes,
What
yes.
controls would you expect to find in place in such an instance?
Computerized control, the computer control.
I see magic is coming in the chat. Yes, computerized controls. You guys can shout out loud. I'm taking all answers. Let's get it
General
out there.
controls.
Okay, now start
IT
giving me
general
points in the
controls.
solution. Okay, now start giving me the points in the solution. Start listing points for marks.
As you said, the building, then they would have to have an office which a locked door. That's the physical controls, a controlled access. And then also to the computer in terms of password, that will be your general IT control, I think. For them to access that computer, they must have access controls.
Brilliant. So what we have here, you see only specific users should be granted access to the terminals, which is the building, and provided with unique credentials. Some controls must be in place for a person entering to enter physiological controls. Like if you're going into a building, there should be thumbprints in place or access cards in place. Now, when you access the computer, what controls would be in place when if you open a computer in front of you and you want to access it? What pops up on screen?
Passwords.
Your username and password, which is your access control.
Username and password. And what should happen to this username and password? If anybody takes out their computer today, you're watching the lecture on your computer, right, or your phone, be it any mobile device, you bring a username and password to access your phone, even if it's a tempered biometric, it's credentials. So, for these computer controls, list a few more easy marks.
The password should be unique, containing characters, symbols, capitals.
I'm just gonna mute and then you guys can unmute and answer again. Sorry about that. I'll mute. Okay, whoever wants to answer, you can unmute and answer. So we are computer controls, so you may go again. Computer controls should consist. I got 6 characters, so to not make it obvious. Policy for passwords should be enforced, should be changed regularly, should not be obvious, okay? So those are controls that should generally be in place for the computer environment. Also, what we're having is, I see alphanumeric is popping up, appropriate screen design, it's an easy mark. You're always going to find this in the computer environment. Screen dialogues to assist you. I mean, if you look at, if you even go on to, I mean, even in terms of the inverse, if you go on to like, perhaps let's take an online retailer, let's go on to Amazon. You go onto Amazon's website. Obviously now, in terms of entering a password on a computer, you're going to enter a password which has a username, password which is credentials. The screen should pop up to you. You're creating a profile. I see that's popping up. Great. Appropriate screen layout. You want to see the take-a-lot sign in front of you. You're adding items to your basket. Screen dialog should alert the data capture of errors detected. If you now enter a name in your ID number field, it should create an error. So we go further on, and what we see here is, I just want to see the answers that are coming through. I want to see if everyone's on the same lead of where we're going with this. I see there were alphanumeric. Okay, so we got the alphanumeric tests. Can I get some more of these tests in the computer environment? And what is alphanumeric? What are the other tests that should come into play? Because what we have here is alphanumeric. I got few others that are coming into play. Anybody? What examples? These are called error checks. Okay. So for the error checks, those also feature in a few marks. Yes, I see. We have an answer on error checks as well. So for the error checks, these compose of validity check to see if the data captured is valid. If you're entering a specific code, if it's an airline reference number, and if it, for instance, states EK744, we need to see if it's valid. Alphanumeric falls within an emmer as well. It contains alphabets as well as numbers. Certain aspects are only numerical tests or text tests or data. So for numerical, your ID number would obviously need to be in numerical form, otherwise it will produce an error. Missing data is where you are on, well, let's go back to the example of take-a-lot. You on the address of entering your physical address, and you perhaps did not capture the suburb and the postal code. An error will display on screen in red. It will not allow you to go for the next screen. That's missing data. There's various other error checks as well, sequence check, etc. But I mean, these are just a few more easy marks that can be obtained, from these controls. Ideal controls that should be in place. More often than not, you will see there will be an issue of maybe segregation of duties, and that's an easy mark that can be obtained. So once you guys go through this question, it would be advisable to then mark the question against the suggested solution. As can be seen, there's 18 available marks. Time does not permit us today to go into detail of this question. But what I would suggest is, go into the question, have a look at what is here, look at the easy as well as the moderate marks. And there's a lot of sufficient easy marks that can be obtained to do really well in this question. So for part A, there was the Code of Professional Conduct. And you could then see various aspects with the Code of Professional Conduct. So I see there's a question on when the information will be posted. It will be posted, it probably will be posted soon, the parts A as well as part one rather and part 2. And I'll follow up with the other lecture in terms of the feedback session for test 1. But the CPC, you'll see that there are threats, and with these threats, there are safeguards as well. But we spoke about the risks at the overall financial statement level. You guys have enough of these type of questions. Make sure you practice them. Let's see main concern aspects. This is the internal audit function as well. And remember that we have also went into the risks at the assertion level that we've done in the part 1 of the session, and that one is the risks at the overall financial statement level, and there was a part, I think, also with risk at the assertion level. Yes, here we go. For a transaction as well as an account balance, this is a good question to go through as well. We have then looked at the aspects of we looked at materiality in detail, during the first session. Into the detail of a materiality calculation as well as the parts for that. So here's a good one to practice. Go into other various past papers and questions for that. What we do see here as well, and on the part F is, weaknesses in internal controls as well as the recommendations. More often than not, when you identify a weakness, for example, here we see there's a lack of segregation of duties, and due to a lack of segregation of duties, there should be sufficient segregation of duties that should be put into place. If there's a lack of authorization, the lack of authorization, there should be authorization that should be put into place. So it's those type of aspects, Backers do not sign the order. What do you think should happen? If you identify that as a weakness, what should happen? Backer should sign the order. If there's no approval, it's a weakness. What should happen? There should be an approval. Segregation of duties feature more than once. If there's no segregation, there should be segregation. If there's no approval, there should be approval. If there's no signatory access, approval rather, there should be that in place. Customers do not sign the delivery orders. What do you think the answer should be? Customers should sign the required orders for delivery. So those are the type of, when you get something of weaknesses and recommendations, it's really easy once you identify a weakness to generate a recommendation as such. Are there any other questions for today as we have come to the conclusion of the session? And this question will be left with you guys to practice and write under examination conditions. But are there any other questions that perhaps any of you guys may have? I see there's not too many questions. There's one technical. So kindly assist during free on board if the risk and rewards are passed, but still in transit. Does such inventory have to be included in the financial statements? So once risks and rewards for inventory is passed, what that means is all the risks relating to that inventory, like whether it gets lost, whether it gets burnt or damaged, any risk relating to it, and any rewards as a result of that inventory, which means you can take that inventory and it's perhaps worth 1,000. Perhaps it's a particular electronic component, and you would then resell that, at a profit of 50% at 1,500. So that's the reward that you would receive as a result of that inventory. Once that has passed to you, you would then need to include that inventory in your financial statements, because even once the rewards in essence would be if that's insured, and once the risks of the theft as well as the reward of you having insurance cover on that occurs, you would be eligible to obtain an insurance payout, and as a result you would get the benefits of that inventory, hence the inventory should be included in your financial statements. So in terms of the scope of the test, ladies and gentlemen, if you all have listened very carefully in part 1 as well as part 2, hence the sessions were recorded, you would see that the entire syllabi was taken into account for the scope of, learning unit 6 and 7. There's not a large amount of things we've broken up. We focused on a lot of question aspects, different parts of required, and if you look at, if you go through, what we've done in part 1 and part 2 really well in detail, you practice your questions in your examination bank, you should do okay. You should do quite well. If you fall into a position where you've exhausted the 5 questions and you go on to external sources such as like the SAICA past IAC examinations, quite a few are available online on their website. And you could get other questions on auditing as well. So, generally, you should then be okay. you guys should be okay. The key is to practice a lot of questions under examination conditions. Practice these 5 questions. Practice these 5 questions, write them out, mark it against the suggested solution. Practice the questions that I am gonna upload, which are the scenario. Yep. As was my question. So go through this question as well. This was a past question. This will be uploaded, and it's a good question because it deals with various elements of the scope, as can be seen here. And it also can be utilized in future for test 3, forthcoming part G and H. You don't need to know part G and H for now, but for test 3, you'll learn it at that point in time. And like I've stated, for other additional external questions, you go and obtain it on the online at SciCA's website. And you can then practice those additional questions as well. Okay, I see we have a question from Angeline.
Okay, regarding the inventory, I would like you to listen to my risk and assess it. So if I am to say that there is a risk that inventory in transit are not included in the financial statement, then I'll say that the assertion is completeness. Will that be correct? Because from your understanding, I had that this inventory that is still in transit, it must be in the financial statement.
So I think your question related to something very specific. We raise the technicality of when the risk and rewards are transferred. That's when you should include it in the financial statements. And if we do ascertain that that's indeed what should happen, and if it's not, then it would in essence be a completeness issue of it not being complete, where it should in essence be there. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else feels intimidated by questions? What are we going to do? We're going to do questions. Am I correct? A lot of them.
Yes, sir.
You guys
Yes,
got that?
Mm-hmm.
Please. You guys got to do questions. Enough questions and more questions. Has anybody completed all of the self-assessment questions as yet and marked them?
No, we're still busy and we mix them with the IAC.
Okay, great. So as long as everybody is in progress, complete them. I think we looked at the table. Question 1, risks at the overall financial statement level and overall responses to reduce those risks in acceptable level. Planning and performance materiality. We've done that in the previous session. Preliminary engagement activities for question number 2, risks at the assertion level and weaknesses in a system. Number 3, pre-engagement activities. So good practice on pre-engagement activities as it goes down to feature in 4 and 5 as well. Risks at the overall financial statement level, risks at the assertion level, materiality, weaknesses and recommendations. So there's quite a few repetition of topics that are examinable. But as you will see, there are various trigger points in different questions. So there are common risks which would feature, and then there are unique risks which would feature. And those are based on the trigger points that are in the questions. Please reach out to me if you have any particular queries. that you would like clarity on, as well as if you would like to arrange a consultation, please reach out to me, and if we, we'll definitely reach a time that works for both of us, and we can then consult on any particular matters that you guys have queries on. In saying that, thank you. You've been a fantastic audience, very participating in the aspects, of the scenario, as well as various aspects of the required and the solution. The questions that I've received today were brilliant, very intelligent questions. I can see that, people are taking a deep dive into understanding that information is provided for a reason in a scenario, and not only just for the sake of providing information. So that's why all information that you do read, you see how I have these highlights. I did not make comments on the side of the paragraphs, which I do, but you can make those comments, and whatever comment you make, it can be like cryptic notes of what the paragraph tells you. Like Mrs. Lamini I say you could just make a small note, CPC, go at, dump question mark. JSC listed, risk of material misstatement, question mark. Those type of things. Test one, I think they're reaching I think there's a question on when the marks for test one. Will be released. I think, the conclusion of test one is being finalized for the marking process, and then marks would, follow probably then shortly thereafter. Yes. So that brings us to the conclusion once again. And we will part ways for now. But like I've stated, reach out to me via email if you'd like to reach schedule a consultation, clarity on any of the aspects relating to the auditing syllabus. It could be a question on anything in any topic relating to any of the tests. You are more than welcome to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good night, sir.
Good night.